Good afternoon. Once again, welcome to just another brief episode of the Diary of a Lawyer. And today I want to briefly discuss what the legal definition and the brief background around crimes against humanity, a term that sadly that exists, that shouldn't exist, but for the historical and ongoing atrocities around the world. Um, um, Obviously, one of the first sources of authority is United Nations, which has the various organs that look into these matters. And according to the UN, they give a brief background of what where the genesis of this term sadly came from, and they claim that it's not clear exactly where the term crimes against humanity was first realized, and they state that some scholars refer to go back as far as the 18th century and early 19th century in the context of slavery and European colonialism in Africa and other places. They also make reference to atrocities committed in Belgium, for example, in the so-called Congo Free State. They also highlight the views of other scholars who point to, such as the declaration issued around 1915 by the then Allied governments of France, Britain, and Russia, which was associated with the mass killing of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, to as sort of where the term was labeled or characterized or categorized in terms of the context of international crimes. However, since then, the very notion of the crimes against, according to the United Nations, has metaphysized and synthesized and evolved under the purview of customary international law, and in many other jurisdictions, for example, such as the International Criminal Court, which was set up. The statute was sort of ratified around 1998. Other international crime tribunals in the former Yugoslavia, in Rwanda, and also other states in their own way have sort of inherited or legislated for crimes against humanity in their domestic law. But the most central, yet closer to codification regarding crimes against humanity is the 1998 Rome Statute, which established the International Crime Court, and it sort of makes reference and sets out the examples of the atrocities that could be classified, sadly, as crimes against humanity. And it's Article 7, which is of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and I've read it verbatim in this context, which says that for the purposes of this statute, crimes against humanity means any of the acts that they list below as part of a widespread or systemic attack directed against any civilian population with the knowledge of the attack, and I quote, number one, murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation or forcible transfer of population, imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty in the violation of fundamental rules of international law, torture. They go on to list rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, or any other form of sexual violence of comparable gravity. They add persecution against, and I'm reading verbatim because it's really important that we refer to the actual text per se. So the persecution against any identifiable group or collectivity on political, racial, national, ethnic, religious, gender, as defined in paragraph 3, or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law in connection with any referred to in the paragraph above, or on this very paragraph of the that defines under Article 7 of the statute um, that created the International Criminal Court. They go on to mention enforced disappearances of person, the crime of apartheid, and last but not least, other inhumane acts of similar character intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental or physical health. And they conclude that for the purposes of the definitions of that enumerated above, that an attack directed against any civilian population means, just to be clear, what an attack on the civilian population means, it's a course of conduct involving the multiple commission of acts referred to in above against any civilian population pursuant to or in furtherance of a state or organizational policy to commit such attack. So that's very clear. It's not a one-off, it's a systemic, organized preparation, planning, and sustained attack on a civilian population over, pursuant to the furtherance of a state organization or the state's motive. They also gone to list what they claim to be the elements of the crime. And again, I read verbatim, according to Article 7.1 of the Rome Statutes, crimes humanity, this is important, do not need to be linked to an armed conflict and can also, in peacetime, similar to the crime of genocide. So it's not necessarily acts that happen during the course of the war or an armed conflict, but it could happen in peacetime. And also that the same article provides a definition of the crime that contains other elements, and some of those physical elements could involve the commission of the acts that are specified above, i.e. torture, imprisonment, enslavement, murder, etc., etc., and very important, other inhumane acts. And so, but as a contextual element, these are committed where as a part of a widespread systemic attack directed against systemic population, as I mentioned above. Now, the mental element, i.e. the mens rea, that's necessary to establish to establish part of the legal element necessary for the commission of that attack, is with quote unquote with knowledge of the attack. And that mental element determines that the crimes against humanity involve either a large-scale violence in relation to a number of victims, or, as I said before, it's an extension of a broad geographic area, or a methodical type of violence, systemic. So key elements are widespread, systemic, but this excludes, understandably, random, accidental, isolated acts of violence that may happen from time to time, probably by individuals or characters that could happen in a society. But they go on to mention Article 7.2 of the Rome Statute, which determines that crimes against humanity must be committed in furtherance of state or organization policies, as I mentioned above, to commit an attack. The plan or policy does not necessarily need to be explicitly stipulated or formally adopted, and can therefore be inferred from the totality of circumstances. This is crucial. So there doesn't never need to be a well-written, planned, document that says you shall do ABC at this time, but there should be an inference if those elements above are established. Crucially, in contrast to genocide, crimes against humanity do not necessarily need to target a specific group. Instead, according to the United Nations and the specific 1990 statute that established the International Criminal Court, is instead the victim of the attack can be any civilian population, regardless of affiliation or identity, And another distinction is that crimes against the human to sort of fall under the purview of crimes against humanity. There has to be. It's not necessarily. There's not necessarily in proof of an overall specific intent. A simple intent could suffice to commit any of the enumerated acts above. And it goes on to mention, with the exception of the act of persecution, which requires discriminatory intent. And so there's a distinction there in terms of persecution. And crucially, more importantly, the perpetrator must also act with the knowledge of the attack against the civilian population and their action as part of the attack. So, that is a brief summary of what is can be contextualized in legal terms as crimes against humanity. Sadly, a term that we have come to hear so often in the context of what's going on both historically and contemporary in all the discourses and actions around the world that have become so familiar, sadly, in the global context, and that at a time when there's a plethora of challenges that are facing humanity. One of those acts is sadly this term that has become now familiar into the lexicon of international affairs and the day-to-day news reporting, which is crimes against humanity. So just to summarize, for the avoidance of any doubt, that the crimes against humanity lists or can be to sort of to qualify a legal definition. These are acts that are committed on a widespread or systematic scale, directed against a civilian population with knowledge of the attack. And these include murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation or forcible transfer of population, imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty in violation of fundamental rules of international law, torture, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, or any other form of sexual violence of comparable gravity, persecution against any identifiable group, or collectively on political, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender grounds, enforced disappearance of persons, the crimes of apartheid, and other inhumane acts of a similar character, intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or mental or physical autonomy of another person or human being. And so again, we have it in a nutshell, the legal definition of crimes against humanity. We will expand further as we go along, but I hope that gives you some sense of understanding of, for the purposes of education, awareness, and for whatever lawful reasons one may need to distinguish between crimes against the humanity and other crimes performed by a state. And so there we shall leave it, and we'll speak again very soon in this series of Diary of a Lawyer, focusing on international law and legal issues and human rights that impact our day-to-day lives. And remember, we're here to educate, inspire, develop, and smash barriers to create a better world for everyone. Thank you, and speak again. Bye.